From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. As Andre Johnson
Jr.
Do not forget the juniors. Very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, to share, to rate, to review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Also, once again, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. Andre, it's Wednesday. It was a beautiful day in the city of New Orleans. A gorgeous day outside in the city of New Orleans. Wherever you're watching, either on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network or on YouTube, I hope it's a beautiful day for you as well. You know, we checked some analytics the other day. Every now and then we'll do that. Getting some people watch from Dallas, from Houston, from Mobile, from Sacramento. So it's been a wide range of people watching the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast, and we certainly are glad you are doing so. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling real good. You know, like you said, it's a beautiful day outside. Nothing that you can really complain about unless you're a Saints fan wondering who's going to play quarterback in week 1 of the NFL season, because as the time goes on, it feels like we get more and more confused by these developments between the Saints and Derek Carr.
So Monday, we really broke down the timeline of everything and how nothing made sense. And, you know, you think more and more about it. More stuff needs to be unraveled. More stuff needs to be uncovered. But there are more layers to this that, you know, unfortunately, both parties involved aren't saying anything. So you're left to kind of talk through or hear through third-party conversation or, other reports. But I felt like it was important today to just kind of revisit it in a way. There's been a couple new things that have been brought up. Nothing crazy, but I wanted to share my thoughts on a couple new things that have brought up. And B, like, okay, so is it done? Derek Carr to the Saints, is it done? Is it official? I think that's where we wanted to go with the big picture today.
Right, with all of the developments throughout the offseason, from the restructure to all of a sudden the mysterious injury that popped out of nowhere. The Saints having already started their, offseason conditioning is voluntary. The question we have to ask as we look back on all of the weird things between Carr and the Saints and even his 2 years here in New Orleans, has Derek Carr played his last game in a Saints jersey, Sean?
All right, I'm going to get to that answer, but as usual, I got some stuff I want to talk about beforehand because things have transpired. A few things have come to light since the last time we spoke, just on Monday. We were talking about optics on Monday. Well, it got even worse because the day the offseason program began, the Saints post, pictures of guys and video of guys working out. I don't know who operates Derek Carr's social media. I don't know if he does. But it was the worst time drop of a post that he's had since he's been here. It's while his guys are over here doing their work, he's in a $500,000 Rolls Royce EV doing a car review. So the optics went from bad to worse. So let's just get that out of the way. But I'm going to move on from optics right now because there's more to unpack and there's more to just kind of when stuff like this unfolds. And you don't really have concrete answers either way, or you're left to somewhat speculate and kind of piece things together. Naturally, more questions come up. And there was a podcast, I believe it's called Scoop City with Diana Rossini and former Saints quarterback Chase Daniel. They do a podcast. It's a pretty good podcast. Pretty good insight into, obviously, Rossini's been doing this for a long time, and Chase Daniels has a unique, sort of workings of not just the NFL locker rooms, but the quarterback room. He's been in a few of them. So, they added a little more fuel to the fire with their podcast when they suggested that Derek Carr's shoulder was, quote, a little bit of an excuse made here with the shoulder so Derek doesn't look bad asking for a trade. To then, Chase Daniels says, actually, I think that makes him look worse. And frankly, I agree. I agree with that. If that's what Carr wanted, to ask for a trade or a release, he should have just done that right away, right out of the gate. He didn't do it. More on that later. But I really wanted to dive into it, and feel free to jump in after this. I really wanted to dive into because people have taken that and run with it. Saints Twitter, as you can imagine, has taken that and run with it because there was some paraphrasing of what she actually said, and then people did things off of that paraphrase based off a few tweets. But I really wanted to dive into this faking an injury type of discussion. I thought about this yesterday, and we're not talking about Little League here. We're talking about the National Football League, best of the best, highest of the highs when it comes to the sport and health, and how much health affects the sport and how much the organization that player represents is invested in the health of those players. And if there was any kind of fishiness, there would have to be some kind of guardrails in place to protect the Saints in this situation, right?
You would think.
I mean, look, that is the Saints, especially if they suspected this to be, whoa, what do you mean here? I mean, everyone is suspecting this. So I would think the Saints would obviously have their, kind of radar up as well. He is their highest paid player, and obviously something seems off from the last time they spoke, and boom, out of nowhere, he may be out for the year. So if you're the Saints and you find that out, wouldn't you, a week, 3 days before the offseason program, wouldn't you, get your team doctors, head on a plane to Fresno right now and say, let me check this out. I mean, this is our guy. We're banking on him this season to check him out, or at the very least, get as much detail as humanly possible from if there's any new information about a new injury from the doctor that diagnosed that injury. If it is an old injury, let me back up. Of course they would do that. And I'm going to believe they did so, at least to the point of that they did their due diligence in checking to make sure the injury is legit. They clearly understand how this looks optically, but frankly, they need him. Okay? If they want to be competitive, they need him. Sorry, haters. I know you understand. I know right now you're so disgusted with him. You don't want anything to do with him, and I totally get it. But you got to understand the Saints' point of view. If they want to be competitive, they need somebody that's going to give them their best chance to be competitive. And if something was not adding up, there would have had to have been some kind of legal action they can take, right? When you talk about quote-unquote faking an injury, that's why my final thought on Carr's injury is this, and I had a few conversations today, and I think I'm heading in the right direction. It's not fake, like in the sense that we may think it's fake, like the Paul Pierce being rolled out in a wheelchair, and all of a sudden he pops up. I think he's known for a while that at some point he will eventually need to have some kind of surgery on his shoulder, especially if the report is true that this stems back from the 2023 AC joint that he suffered against Green Bay and then later against Detroit. I think it is true that at some point in his career, he knows and everyone knows he's going to have some kind of surgery. I believe the Saints have known that for a while. But they also know, and he also knows, and everyone also knows. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely something he can play through if he chooses to do so, because he did it last year. He did it last year and be effective. Look, first 2 weeks of the season last year, Derek Carr, we're talking MVP. But it is significant, yeah, right. But it is, so it's a significant enough injury to where the Saints can't cry foul, because I think they understand and they know based on, look, it's your quarterback's shoulder. It's probably the most valued asset on the entire organization right now. So my theory is simply this. Tell me if I'm off base. This was always kind of maybe his last resort, maybe his, look, I really don't want to be here. I don't want to have to play this card, but now I can use this now. And I think that's where the disconnect lies. I think the Saints just piece together the timeline of I go back to the April 1st discussion with Kellen Moore saying they expect him to be there for the offseason conditioning program. I don't think the Saints thought he would play that card. What do you think?
I think that, we talked the last podcast about timeline, and I think the timing adds up to one thing, and we were talking about it in the sports office. Around April 1st, the days after that, the draft discussion really started heating up, and all of a sudden, one name entered, Shedeur Sanders. And all of a sudden, the Saints went from being, the odds-on favorite to draft a cornerback in the first round, or an offensive lineman, or an edge rusher, and all of a sudden, the odds shot up to, I've seen them as high as minus 130 for the Saints to pick a quarterback. One thing that a guy like Derek Carr knows, I mean, when you look at Derek Carr, let's say he forces his way out of New Orleans, where else would you start? I don't think there's a lot of places in the NFL where Carr would start for any considerable amount of time, but the New Orleans Saints might be the only team where Carr can realistically, if he stays healthy that long, start 17 games. But that would be thrown in jeopardy if somebody with the cachet and somebody with the national media attention of a Shedeur Sanders were to walk in this door, because the Saints picked him at number 9 overall because he fell. So the timing is kind of interesting of, all of a sudden, Carr is bringing up he has this injury when the Saints could potentially draft a quarterback.
And look, and just to continue with the chat about that as it pertains to the podcast, because they use the word trade bait and Chase agreed. My question is, though, okay, I can somewhat see that he's trying to force his way out, but does that really help his value to say he's got a shoulder injury? And if the Saints can't fight it or cry foul, there has to be at least something there. Wouldn't that hurt his trade value? Or wouldn't that at least make it look we got to at least check this guy out? We can't just sign off on any kind of deal if this guy's got a real injury, if this guy's got a real shoulder injury. Now, if everyone thinks it's BS, then they go by, and that's certainly fine. But there's a reason why Carr and his camp left themselves the out with surgery considered. Not a guarantee, considered. But, man, does he really think he's going to be appealing to other teams, at least a lot of other teams that will want someone like that? When you really think about it, you mentioned what really changed between April 1st. I go back to that day because that's the key for me, because actions speak louder than words, and the main action was the restructure and the lukewarm comments. But then you had your head coach saying, we expect him, or we're excited to see him for the offseason conditioning program. Then all of a sudden, what changed? Well, right after that, gambling odds dropped, and Shedeur Sanders to the Saints skyrocketed. It caught fire. Plus, the Saints have done an exhaustive due diligence research on all the quarterbacks in this class. Is that what forced the leak? Is it less about I want out or more about I don't want another quarterback here? Is that what caused the leak? Choose carefully, because you might get your future, but you might not have your present right now. And if you want to be competitive, you may need to take a step back. My take, you mentioned Shedeur. I mentioned Shedeur. Of all the players, of all the guys that could be drafted, Shedeur Sanders is the one quarterback Carr has zero interest in sharing a quarterback room with. Zero interest in sharing a quarterback room. Can you imagine, Andre, how relentless and aggressive and over the top the calls from this fan base would be with Derek Carr and Shedeur Sanders? It would obviously start the season with Derek Carr as a starting quarterback, but after every mistake, after every loss, after every minor thing, there's going to be more and more calls for Shedeur. They would boo him relentlessly.
The signs in the dome.
Just thinking about the tension makes me a little uncomfortable right now. To me, that's where I think not a lot, but I think that's where some of the issues certainly lie. And finally, I got to touch on this, because we talked about this in the sports office. A little bit of irony I want to get to here, because if you take it at face value, and I believe at the end of the offseason, Derek Carr wanted out. I think at some point he was convinced and he was okay, and then I think at some point it changed before last Friday. So when you started the offseason, as much as they hate him, Derek Carr and the Saints fan base both wanted the same thing. That is for Carr to be out of here. Get out of town. I don't want to be your quarterback. You don't want me as your quarterback. At least at the moment, Carr is making it easier for that to happen. Carr is making it easier to give them what they want. But if you're the type of person that either laughs at, appreciates, or understands pettiness, it kind of feels like Carr kind of did it his way and kind of capitalized a little bit on the pettiness here. After he got paid and basically gave the fan base, the same fan base that's melting down right now, the same fan base that has hated him since he got here, the proverbial middle finger on the way out the door. Yeah, I'm out. Yeah, I'm not your guy, but I did it my way and I got paid. And it's almost like, dang, he really did that to us. He really got us. And I think that's why you're seeing a little bit of the not a little bit, a lot of the reaction, the anti-Derek Carr reaction today? What say you?
I think that leads right into what I kind of had my mind on, and it's something that I mentioned, I think, on that emergency podcast we had on Friday. And as I really dig into it, I'm like, yeah, honestly, this could be the truth. Derek Carr will go down as one of the biggest disappointments in Saints history. And the irony about it is it's not even necessarily about his play on the field.
Exactly.
Because when you think of the quarterbacks before Carr, let's start with Andy Dalton.
Yeah.
Andy Dalton wasn't hated by Saints fans. They may not have been, painting murals of him on the side of the, walls on Bourbon Street, but there was the same disdain for Andy Dalton as there was for Derek Carr. Andy Dalton was 6-8 with the Saints. 2,800 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Didn't light the world on fire. He was average at best. Jameis Winston, New Orleans' second son. We love Jameis for so many reasons. Even Jameis, 6-4.
Yeah.
2,300 yards, 20 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. Jameis, now we know he is a light in a dark place. Jameis is an incredibly fun human being, great to talk to, great on television. You can see why people love Jameis, but when you look at his play on the field, he wasn't even as effective as Derek Carr, who was 14-13, 6,000 passing yards, 40 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. On the field, Derek Carr was better than Dalton and Jameis, both of the quarterbacks that came before him. But neither Dalton nor Jameis had the same vitriol and hate and disdain that, the fans have towards Derek Carr. So you kind of think, well, why is that? Number one, the famous Drew Brees quote, if you love the city will love you back. If there's one thing Jameis Winston did, he loved the city, and he embraced the city and everything in it. He was, some people criticized Derek Carr for not being at Mardi Gras. Jameis Winston was at Mardi Gras, and he wasn't even a member of the team anymore.
I don't recall last Mardi Gras. Was he here last Mardi Gras, Derek Carr?
I don't remember it. Not
really
to say that he was. I don't remember him being there, but I
remember there was the float,
that.
and he kind of mocked himself off the you remember that there was the float with him in the red zone, and he kind of made the social media post, but I don't think he was here though. No, I'm sorry. Continue.
Exactly. So I think that the whole if you love the city will love you back. Maybe Derek Carr has not embraced the city like many Saints fans would like to see him do so, but I think a lot of the frustration with Derek Carr comes from the fact that he was unable to win with the Saints. He was unable to get the Saints into the playoffs, which, to be fair, neither was Jameis Winston, neither was Andy Dalton.
No one's been able to do
but
it.
It's the additive over the years, and I think the frustration with Carr is linked to the frustration that this fan base has with Mickey Loomis. I mean, this is a Saints team that for 20 years was near or at the top of the NFL. They were always in the conversation of teams that were, right there, or teams that were going to be in the NFC championship picture and all of that. They haven't made the playoffs in 4 years now. That's the longest drought since 2001 to 2005. At the end of that drought, what ended it was the Saints finding the right quarterback. And that's where I'm going with this. It is imperative right now for the Saints to find the right quarterback, because this fan base is sick and they're tired of losing. I mean, 4 years of investing everything that you're investing monetarily, emotionally, going to these games just to see your team stink it up on the field. They're tired of that, So whether it's Dalton, Jameis, Carr, you've missed on your last 3 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You cannot keep missing on these quarterbacks because Saints fans are getting frustrated. Right now, that frustration is being taken out on Derek Carr. But the guy who's sharing that frustration, who's almost getting to hide behind the Carr right now, is the guy who's making the decisions on these quarterbacks, and Mickey Loomis. So let's just say if he missed with Carr and it is indeed his last game played as a Saint, he can't afford many more misses.
Well, we think. We think. We think. But the situation that they've been in, it just that they keep repeating the same cycle, and it's always the same sort of thing. And now, I just wonder how hard, or if at all, they kind of put him out there, made some calls about a possible trade for Derek Carr, because it sure feels like to me like Derek Carr's first desire was to not be here. Okay,
and that's the feeling that we got from. Remember in the locker room. At the end of the season, Derek Carr talked, and that's kind of what we both walked away with. Yeah,
absolutely. It's like it sounded like a guy that was preparing to be out.
Yeah,
or was at least laying the groundwork to say, "Look, these are my rules. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. And if we can't, agree on that, I'm out." Now, the process to actually get to where they're at right now, no one foresaw that process. Did they ever consider cutting him? We did so many podcasts on why it was not financially stable to do so, and yet they did all the moves they would have done had they cut him without cutting him. And they restructured him, and they got a lot of salary cap space. But who knows what they want to use it on? No one knows anything because nobody's saying anything. That's why next week's press conference with I hope Mickey Loomis is going to be very interesting. All that to say, if you had to place odds on it, that he's played his last game as a Saint, I'm going to say this. I'm giving it an 85% chance he's played his last game as a New Orleans Saints quarterback. I'm giving myself a small out just in case somehow, I'm going to use air quotes if you're not watching on YouTube, he has a miraculous recovery, the shoulder's fine, and the Saints don't draft a high-end quarterback. And all of a sudden, look, I need a job, you need a quarterback, we want to win, I can at least help you guys try to do that. Probably won't win much, but at least we can try. I'm giving myself that little bit of sliver of an out there, but I think more than likely Derek Carr's days as a New Orleans Saint are over.
I'm going to go with 99%, and that'll shoot up 1 to 100 if the Saints do indeed draft a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders in the first round. I don't see how you as a player in a franchise come back from the spot that Carr and the Saints are in. And even if he does, I mean, imagine Derek Carr running out of the tunnel in the Superdome week 1. Do you know how loud those boos are going to be?
Yeah.
It's going to be louder than the boos they had for Sean Payton and poor Will Lutz on week 7 against the Broncos. So, yeah, I think that at this point, with everything that's happening, I think the marriage between the Saints and Derek Carr, it's probably heading towards an ending point.
Can I change mine to 90-10? I'll probably go. I'll go 90-10. I said 85-15. I'll go 90-10. Yeah, I'm with you. I probably didn't go strong enough there. So I think that's ultimately where it stands. Now we'll see how this all unfolds over the next week or so. But that will inevitably lead us to another discussion, and I think we're gonna have that discussion on Friday. Is what's next at the quarterback position? Because what's next on the roster is Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler has if Derek Carr is not here, let me just say, and we're gonna have a whole other pod on this. Spencer Rattler will have the opportunity to compete to be the starter if he wins a job, but. And I still see it in the comments. People are so hyped on Rattler. I don't think an organization could, in good faith, start a guy that didn't win. Not that he didn't win a game last year, but there was not a single game where he or any of the backup quarterbacks, Hayner as well, didn't put 4 consecutive quarters together in a game. We had a good half here, good quarter there, a couple good drives here, but not nearly consistent enough. And obviously, new system. Much more health. He'll do better. I have no doubt he'll take a leap in year 2. But when you look to the quarterbacks in the draft, dude, I'm telling you right now, as we sit here right now, this may change by the time we do our last pod before the draft. I do not think the Saints are drafting a quarterback at 9. I'm just going to say it.
Man, that's tough because, again, to me, it revolves around Shedeur Sanders.
That's it.
If Shedeur Sanders falls to 9, I am still dropping everything and I'm picking Shedeur. If Shedeur's not there at 9, I'm not reaching for Jackson Dart. At that point, the priority goes to the best of the rest. Maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round, maybe you go for a Tyler Shuck, a Jalen Milroe. Maybe later in the draft, you look at a Will Howard. We did a podcast about the best of the rest.
Go check them out.
Exactly. Yeah,
Go
good
check
podcast,
it out.
by the way.
It really was.
Some of the other quarterbacks in the draft, but to me, it all revolves around Shedeur and how highly the Saints view him, because I think if he's there at 9 and you don't take him, and I'm not saying they'll necessarily be the same player, but hindsight is 20/20. And I was just laughing at somebody on Twitter who was like, you remember when the Saints traded up in the draft and everybody thought Lamar Jackson was going to be the pick and it was Marcus Davenport? The former Saints coach is still saying, man, we almost drafted Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
If you pass on Shedeur Sanders and he is there, and Shedeur Sanders evolves into a top 10, top 5 quarterback in the league, when you undoubtedly needed a quarterback, that's going to be another one of the many strikes on this team's, resume when it comes to how they've drafted, particularly in the first round.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. Where I will say is he's got to be in the realm of the grade. No, what I mean by that is, if right now he is prospect number 21 on your board, he doesn't all of a sudden become prospect number 7 on your board because Derek Carr may or may not be out. If he is prospect 13 on your board and it's 4 spots, yes, absolutely do it. And that's just based off conversations that I've had. That's what I'm gathering with Shedeur, is maybe a little bit later in the first round sort of grade. So we'll see. We'll see. And I know there was an Albert Breer report that said he does not see him going in the top 10. Shedeur. Todd McShay said the same thing. But then you have guys like Mel Kiper who had him going to the Saints. So I don't think anybody really knows, because you're still trying to formulate right now, and there's still circumstances and decisions you have to make in the best interest of your franchise. So we'll see what happens. But as of right now, I'm leaning towards 9. They do not take a quarterback.
Yeah, if Shedeur's not there, I'm with you. You kind of go back to the plan. I know in your first mock draft, we'll see how that changes in the next week, because I know you've got 2.0 coming up before the NFL.
Try to get it
draft
Monday,
comes
yeah.
out. So we'll see how that changes. But, the Saints are still in need of a cornerback. The Saints could still upgrade their offensive line. The Saints still need a running back. Unfortunately, it seems like another guy whose draft stock has risen a lot is Ashton Jeanty. So I don't know. That was my original pick at 9 when I didn't think Shedeur would be there. So unfortunately, I don't think you'll be able to get an Ashton Jeanty. We know Cam Jordan has really been pushing the Ted McMillan train. So we'll see where the Saints go, because there's a lot of need. There's so many needs on this team. It's almost impossible to miss. That's the good thing about the Saints and where they're drafting. But quarterback or no quarterback is going to have to be the first decision.
Well, they're drafting one. I just don't know where.
Right.
We'll just see. Also, real quick, if you got any offer right now for Derek Carr, would you take it?
Yes,
me too. Absolutely. Get something for it.
Take
if
a
obvious,
6,
even if it's like a 6.
7. Hey,
just take it and be done with it. I don't know if that's going to happen. All right, we got to get out of here. That is Andre Johnson Jr. I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.